Hi everyone, I'm Tom. Today I'm going to be playing Founders of Gloomhaven, and this is a game all about building up the city of Gloomhaven. It's set hundreds of years before the game Gloomhaven itself, but it's where all of the races that you might know from the game, they came together to build the city itself, and this is the spot where the city will one day stand. And we play as one of the races that is in control of a particular resource, and we'll get other resources in setup. We have a special power, and we are going to be spreading out and building things across this map. So you'll start off with your 3 houses with your workers on them. They're not available yet. You'll start off with your 3 bridges stroke gates and 7 money, and also you will have some resources. You will definitely be in control of this resource that your race defines. So the Savas are in charge of stone, which suits them really, and they can never own population or gems. Now, everybody's going to sort out the things that they start off with, and then we're going to have a bit of a draft in player order where you can pick from all of the resources that are in the game. So normally you'll end up with 2 different resources. In a 2-player game only, you will end up with 3 of them, but the resource cards themselves all have restrictions on as well, so you are even more restricted for your 3rd choice. So let's just say, for example, I take those. Your starting resource, your actual race's resource, you're going to get to put 1 stall out on the board in a grey space. And it's up to you really where it goes, but you may want to think about the starting areas here. The entrance areas are usually cheaper to put more stalls in, or buy into other people's stalls, so it may be worth going near one of them. So the city of Gloomhaven itself is split up into 3 sections, and they are broken up by the river here and the wall here, which you can't build across unless it's one of your bridges or gates. There are different terrain types, so I mentioned the grey and the entrance areas. So the grey is central, red is entrance, this is coastal, and this is forested areas. The areas that have got these solid lines, they might come up later. Probably will. They're specific buildings that can go there, and there is this mysterious purple square where nothing can ever go. A big part of this game is combining resources together and then connecting them to more advanced buildings to get advanced resources. So I have stone here. I can see the recipes for all of the resources that I control. So the recipe for stone is, if I can connect population as well, I will be able to produce bricks. So I cannot control population. I cannot be the person that owns it. So someone else will have had to have built population at some point in the game, and their marker will go on to show that they own it. I would have had to buy into it, which we'll see how to do that later. And now it is possible to get a brick building out there. So to be connected, you need to be adjacent to a building or be connected by roads or your gates and bridges. The one big rule is, though, you cannot build adjacent to something of your own, and diagonals are adjacent in this game. So I would have to build this in such a way that it isn't touching, but it's connected. So first I would have had to have built roads in some way. And we'll see all the main actions and things later. But this is now connected, so it's got the prerequisites of stone and population. It's connected to both of those, so I would be able to build one of these, and then bricks can be used for other things. And certain tier 2 resources can be upgraded further into tier 3 resources. But that's a big thing in the game, is combining these resources, working together with other players. But the points are always going to come back to the people that originally made these resources. So I would have my marker on here as the person that built bricks. If anyone ever uses bricks, it's my points, but then they trickle back down to the people who originally built these resources. So I don't necessarily have to be a player that owns these resources. As long as I've bought into them and my disc's somewhere on there, I can have access to them and build some good resources out of them. So as soon as a tile like that is built, it's got the prerequisites on it. So whoever built this tile would generate a point for whoever owns the stone and a point for whoever owns the population. And obviously the owner for those basic resources is always going to be the same. The biggest way of earning points, though, is these prestige buildings. We'll see how they come out later, but you'll see that they all have some kind of desire for leather and jewelry and bricks and government. If you can connect these things up, so let's say our bricks weren't all the way up there and we'd connected everything just fine, and we've managed to connect it to this building, then I would have delivered these bricks. we're saying for argument's sake this was all connected, there are 8 points up for grabs, but then it would trickle back down. Out of those 8 points, I would need to give 1 to whoever owns the stone, in this case that would be me, and 1 to whoever provided the population, which would be yellow. So I would get 7 and yellow would get 1. But if someone else had the stone, they would take that point away. But I would still make quite a lot of points from being the owner of the brick there. There's a little exception in a 2 and 3 player game because some resources will be owned by a neutral player. If a neutral player's resources is used to build anything and they would ever get any points, they would get 2 points instead of 1. So let's get into the main game and actions and things. So we have a hand of 4 cards, 5 in a 2-player game, and on your turn, you'll be the active player and you will pick one of these cards to play from your hand. Now, mainly, you're going to be playing a card from your hand, face up, doing the main action of it. Then you go around the table in player order and see if everybody wants to do a follow action or see which follow action they want to do. They can do the follow action of the action that you just did, which is a slightly less powerful version of it, or they can do a standard follow action, which is always get a money, get a fleeting influence, get a road that you can place on something connected to something that you own, or you can use one of your workers either on your racial power or on a building's power when buildings have been built later on. So you always have those options. You yourself can play a card face down and take one of those standard follow actions as well. It also means that nobody else gets a follow action, and later on in the game, these places where you can place your workers as a follow action can be really, really powerful, so it is sometimes worth denying everybody those follow actions. So what do the actions do? Well, recruit will let you recruit an advisor and gain a fleeting influence. So there's 2 different types of influence. Fleeting, as you might guess, doesn't last the whole game, but it is useful. Lasting influence is permanent and is worth more in votes and is worth a point each at the end of the game if you've still got them. So you would get a fleeting influence and you would get to recruit an advisor from the advisor board over here. The cost to recruit them is on top, either 1 or 2, and there is a prerequisite for each one. You have to own or have access to this resource to be able to take that advisor. You'll then get this many points. For the first few, that's 0, then it will go up to 1 or 3, and you get a permanent influence for hiring the person. The card then goes into your hand and can then be played as an action, and they are all versions of the main 4 actions. So whenever you play these special cards, so this is recruit an advisor for no cost, always get a 2 discount. So when you do this in future, it's treated as if you just played this card in terms of everybody's follow action. So speaking of that follow action, everyone else would then get to recruit an advisor as well, but they wouldn't get the fleeting influence. They get a lasting influence if they hire somebody, but the display does not get replenished until everybody has decided if they're following or not. So you've only got the pick of what was out there originally. The trade action is how we get these basic stalls onto the board. So there is this little table here. The left-hand column is purely for putting your own trade stalls out onto the map. And the cost is defined by where you want to place it. If you want to put it in an entrance area, that's 1 money, and 2 to go in the coast, 3 to go in the central or forested areas. And these are an exception. These do not have to be connected to something you've already built. So this is a way for you to spread out across the map or jump in on something else that someone else is building. This is the only thing that doesn't have to be connected when you put it down. So the first column is for placing one of your own, and that's for one of the 2 or 3 resource types that you own yourself. The next one is buy into a resource. So if any other player has resources out, this is how I would have bought into that population earlier on. The yellow player would have built it somewhere. Then I would have had to have taken this action to buy access to it. Now, when you're building your own, the money goes to the bank. When you are buying access to another player's, if it's the dummy player, it still goes to the bank. But if it's an actual player, I would have to pay the money to them. So depending on where it is, it's 2, 3, or 4. In this case, it's in the central grey area. So I would have to pay the yellow player for money. Their disc stays on top because they're always going to own this. They're always going to get points when it comes back down to population. But now I have access to it, which I would need if I was going to be building the brick advanced building later on in the game, like I plan to. The final one is only in 2 and 3 player games. It's for the neutral player, really. So the resources that aren't in the game that the dummy player controls, it lets you place one somewhere and immediately buy access to it, and it costs that much depending on where you're doing it. So you get to do one of these trade things for playing this as your main action. Everybody else gets to perform one as well, but only in an entrance or coastal space. They cannot do the green or grey option if they are following it. Next is upgrade. If you are the person doing the main action of it, before or after you do the building, you can put a road down. The road has to be connected to the building that you are putting or have put down though. The advanced buildings are these. So it's 4 money for a tier 2 building, and they will be built from tier 1 resources. And then there are tier 3 resources that are built from at least one tier 2 resource. They cost 6. So they have to be connected to the resources that they require. So this would have to be connected to stone and population. This one would have to be connected to leather and metal. As soon as you've built them, the points go out to the people's resources you're using. And the follow action of it is to build the advanced building, but do not get the road. With the construct action, you can build one of your own buildings. Now, there can only be one of your houses in each area, and that's true for advanced buildings as well. There can only be one in each area, and the stalls, just one in each part of Gloomhaven. They have to be connected to something that you own, although not adjacent, as always. They go out, and one of your workers is now free, and now you have the access to your racial action, and once these buildings start getting built around Gloomhaven, they all have an action that you could use as well. He stays on there until you call a vote, which we'll see in a bit. When it comes to income, though, you are going to get a fleeting influence for every house that you've built, which is very, very useful, as you'll see in a minute as well. Houses have to be built on green. As I said, they have to be in different sections. Or you could build your bridges and gates. I should mention they all cost 4, so you get a 1 discount, they cost you 3. So your gates will go through the wall, and this is the only exception. You are allowed to put these adjacent to your own buildings, the bridges and gates. Sometimes you will need to. And they will basically act as a road, but a road that only you can use. So only you count as connected through the bridges and gates. And the basic follow action is to just build a personal building, but you don't get the discount. The final action only exists in a 2-player game, and it's income. So this lets you collect your income, which is basically how many different resource types do you own. So right now on the map, just with these things, I own 1 type. If I build another stone, it's still 1 type, so it's just 1. But the more different types I can get out onto the board, the more money I will make. When I do the income action, and everybody's follow action, they can basically treat that as if I'd played any of these cards, or they can just do one of the standard basic follow actions. So that's the main thing that you're going to be doing. You're going to be playing a card from your hand, face up, usually. And if you do, everybody will get to choose then, do they want to do a follow-up action based on what you did. Now, the other thing that you can do is call a vote. As long as you have at least 2 cards in your discard pile, 3 in a 2-player game, you can call a vote. So the first thing you need to do is look at the cards that were left in your hand, and for each card in your hand, you can take a money, a road, or a fleeting influence. Then you can take all of your cards back, and now everybody else, so not the person who called the vote, gets income. And that works the same way as before. You know, you get a money for each different type you own on the board, and you'll get fleeting influence based on the houses that you have built. And then finally, we have the building proposal vote. You'll see we have 3 prestige buildings here that correspond to these 3 different symbols, which we all have a voting token for. Now, we will be looking at the power that these provide once they're out, or the resources that need to be delivered to them. So, you know, in this case, I'm the big stone guy. This archer's garrison wants some stone delivered to it, and I'd get 4 points from that, so I probably want to vote for that one. So I would get my blue token in one hand. I can't really show you this because one hand's holding the camera, but pretend this is my secret hand. I would put the blue in my hand, and then any influence that I have gained here, I might as well spend my fleeting influence because it's going now either way. So I'd put all my fleeting influence in, and I can decide to spend my lasting influence. The voting card itself counts as 1 influence. Every fleeting influence I spend counts as another influence. So here I would have 3. For every lasting influence I decide to spend, it's 2. So now I would have 5 influence for this vote. We would then reveal everybody's vote, and we would add together the influence for each option that got picked. So I would be contributing 5 towards blue. We would total it up and see who got the most votes. Ties are broken by whoever's got the fewest points. So then say that blue had got voted, we would then look at everybody that voted blue, who contributed the most influence to this building, and then they get to place it somewhere. You can place it anywhere on the board as long as at least one square of it is touching the colour of the building. So this wants to be in the forest somewhere. The only exception is the buildings that have the dark border, so the 2 gatehouses and the ghost fortress on the right there. They have to go in their designated spaces. So as soon as the vote's finished, we get rid of these 2, bring 3 new ones out, and then we carry on again until another vote's called. The game will end when 6 of these prestige buildings have been completed, have had all of their requirements delivered to them. As soon as that's happened, the person who is the active player finishes off, that round, that particular round, when everybody's decided to follow or not. And then you convert all of your lasting influence into points that you've got left over. And then it's just whoever has the most points wins. And if you're tied, you break the tie by seeing who is the furthest away from the current player. They would win in a tie. But I think that is Founders of Gloomhaven. Hopefully I haven't missed anything off there.